The trip had been my idea. A simple getaway, a day in the woods, surrounded by nature, away from the demands of work, traffic, and routine. My husband, Daniel, and I had planned this trip for weeks. My sister, Lauren, and her husband, Eric, were excited about it too. A little retreat in a rustic forest house, just the four of us. A day of laughter, grilled food by the fire, and long talks under the moonlight. And for the most part, it was perfect. The cabin was nestled deep in the woods, a picturesque little place with creaky wooden floors, a stone fireplace, and the scent of pine seeping through every crack. The river nearby hummed softly in the background, its steady rhythm a reminder that life moved on, unbothered by human trivialities. The evening was wonderful. We drank wine, played board games, and watched the fire crackle and dance in the fireplace. Laughter filled the tiny space as stories from childhood resurfaced. I remember feeling so at peace, so content in the warmth of our little circle. But peace is a fragile thing. By midnight, exhaustion settled in. One by one, we retired to our rooms. The old wooden doors creaked as they shut, and the whisper of the trees outside was the last sound I heard before sleep took me. Morning arrived with golden sunlight streaming through the windows. I stretched, feeling an odd sense of lightness, a good mood lingering from the night before. Still wrapped in the warmth of our getaway, I had an idea. Let's go to the river, I announced excitedly, stepping into the living room where everyone was beginning to wake up. Eric looked up from his seat, rubbing his eyes. Sounds nice. But Daniel and Lauren exchanged a look. I don't feel great after last night, Daniel muttered. Me neither, Lauren added, frowning as she hugged herself. Disappointment pricked at me, but I shrugged it off. Well, I don't want to go alone. Eric, want to come? Sure, he said without hesitation. We gathered our towels in a small bag, the air feeling light and easy. I didn't think much of the way Daniel barely looked at me as we left. Or how Lauren sat curled up on the couch, gaze darting to my husband with something unreadable in her eyes. If I had known what I was about to walk back into, I might never have left. The river was beautiful that morning. Cool, refreshing water, sunlight glinting off the ripples. We swam, joked, and skipped stones across the surface like we were kids again. It was peaceful. Simple. But the peace shattered the moment we returned to the cabin. As we stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. The air was too still. Too heavy. Then I heard it, soft giggles, hushed whispers. A sound that did not belong in the early morning. My stomach dropped. I moved quickly, my bare feet making no sound against the wooden floor as I approached the slightly ajar bedroom door. My breath caught in my throat, pulse roaring in my ears. And then I saw them. Daniel. My husband. In bed. With Lauren. My sister. The world tilted. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. My mind refused to process what my eyes were seeing. The sheets tangled around their bodies, Lauren's face flushed, Daniel's hands gripping her waist. Then, everything snapped. A gasp left my throat before I could stop it. They turned. Lauren's eyes widened in horror, her lips parting as if to say something, an excuse, a lie, a plea. Daniel froze, guilt flashing across his face. But none of that mattered. Eric was behind me. And the moment he saw them, rage exploded through him like a wildfire. You son of a... His voice thundered through the cabin. Before I could react, Eric lunged. Daniel barely had time to scramble from the bed before Eric's fist connected with his jaw. The sickening crunch of impact echoed through the room. Lauren screamed. Daniel stumbled backward, clutching his face. Wait, Eric, stop. But Eric wasn't listening. He grabbed Daniel by the collar and threw him against the dresser. A glass lamp crashed to the floor. Wood splintered under the force. Eric. Stop. Lauren sobbed, trying to pull him back. But I just stood there. Watching. Feeling nothing but a deep, consuming numbness. I should have stopped Eric. I should have screamed, cried, done something. But all I could think was, they did this. They deserve this. And as Daniel's blood stained the wooden floor, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. Not even close. The room was a mess of shattered glass, crumpled sheets, and broken trust. Daniel lay on the floor, his lips split, blood trickling down his chin. He groaned, trying to push himself up, but Eric's boot landed square against his ribs, forcing him down with a sharp exhale of pain. "Eric, stop." Lauren sobbed, trying to wedge herself between them. "Please, just stop." But Eric was far from done. His hands shook with fury, his jaw clenched so tightly I thought he might break his own teeth. "You sick bastard," Eric spat, his voice hoarse with rage. "You slept with my wife?" "My wife? In front of me, in the house we all shared for a night?" He grabbed Daniel's shirt, yanking him up before shoving him against the bed frame. "How long, huh? How long has this been going on?" Daniel coughed, spitting blood onto the floor. "Eric, Shut up." Eric roared, his fist raised again. Lauren clung to his arm, desperate. "Eric, please, You what, Lauren?" I cut in, my voice eerily calm. She turned to me, her face streaked with tears, her lips trembling. "I didn't mean for this to happen." I laughed. A cold, hollow sound. "You didn't mean for it to happen? Oh, so you just tripped into my husband's bed?" She flinched, looking away. I took a slow step forward, the rage inside me no longer a fiery explosion like Eric's, but something sharper. Colder. "How long?" I asked, my voice low. She didn't answer. "How long?" Daniel groaned from the floor. It just happened, it was a mistake." "A mistake?" Eric turned on him again, dragging him up by the collar. "You don't get to call this a mistake, you pathetic excuse for a man." Lauren sobbed harder, her body trembling. "It started a few months ago," she finally whispered. I went still. "A few months?" My voice cracked. "You mean, all those times I invited you over? The holidays? The dinners? You sat at my table, smiling in my face while I stopped myself, swallowing the bile rising in my throat." Lauren shook her head wildly. "It wasn't like that. I never wanted to hurt you." I laughed again, sharper this time. "Oh. You just wanted to sleep with my husband behind my back, but hurting me? No, that was never part of the plan, was it?" Daniel tried to stand, but Eric shoved him back down. I turned to my husband. The man I had trusted. The man I had loved. I looked at him, really looked at him, and all I saw was a stranger. "You are disgusting," I whispered. Daniel's swollen face contorted. "It didn't mean anything." I snapped. Before I knew what I was doing, my hand swung across his face with such force that my palm stung. The sound of the slap echoed through the small cabin. "Don't you dare say that to me," I hissed, my breath ragged. "Don't you dare try to downplay this like it's nothing." His eyes darkened, but he didn't fight back. He didn't have the right. Eric let out a bitter laugh. "You know what, Daniel? I thought you were my friend. I trusted you around my wife, just like she trusted her own sister." He exhaled harshly, shaking his head. "You're a goddamn coward." Daniel wiped his bloody mouth, looking away. Eric turned to Lauren now, disgust clear on his face. "And you? I don't even have the words for you." Lauren sobbed. "Eric, I love you, Don't," he said sharply. "Don't say that. You don't get to say that after what you did." The silence that followed was deafening. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms so hard it hurt. "You two deserve each other," I finally said. And trust me, this isn't over. Lauren's lip trembled. What do you mean? I met her gaze, my voice steady and unforgiving. I mean I don't forgive you. I turned to Daniel. And I sure as hell don't forgive you. Eric exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. What now? He muttered, more to himself than to me. I already knew what came next. My revenge wouldn't come in blind rage like Eric's. No, I would make sure they felt this. That every ounce of pain they caused me was repaid in full. I had trusted them both. I had given them love. And now? Now, I would take everything from them. The car ride home was eerily silent. Eric and I sat in the front, while Lauren and Daniel were in the back, bruised, broken, and steeped in shame. The tension was suffocating, the weight of betrayal pressing against my chest like a stone. Eric's knuckles were still raw from the fight, his fingers gripping the steering wheel so tightly I thought it might snap. I kept my gaze locked on the road ahead, refusing to look at the two people behind me. The people I once loved. Lauren had tried to speak, once. A broken, whispered, "I'm so sorry." But one look from me silenced her. Sorry wasn't enough. Sorry wouldn't erase the image of her tangled in sheets with my husband. Sorry wouldn't undo months of lies, of stolen glances, of whispered touches behind my back. No, they didn't get to apologize. They didn't deserve to be forgiven. When we finally pulled up to the house, Eric turned off the engine and exhaled sharply. Get out, he muttered, his voice thick with disgust. Lauren hesitated, her hand hovering over the door handle as if she was waiting for something, for me to say something, to show mercy. I didn't. She stepped out, her shoulders hunched, her face streaked with tears. Daniel followed, his steps slow, unsteady. As soon as they were out, Eric and I stayed seated, watching them. Lauren turned back to me, her face crumbling. Please, let's talk. I finally looked at her. No. A single word. That's all she got. Daniel cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably. We should. Shut up, Eric snapped. Daniel flinched, but he didn't argue. I stepped out of the car, my movements slow and deliberate. I walked past them, up to the house, then turned to face them. My voice was deathly calm. You have 10 minutes to get your things and leave. Lauren's eyes widened in panic. What? You heard me. This isn't fair, she stammered. Where am I supposed to go? I don't care. Her lips trembled. But. 10 minutes, I repeated. If you're still here after that, I'll throw your things on the lawn. Her face crumbled, and for a brief moment, I almost felt something, almost. But then I remembered the way she looked in that bed. The way she gasped when I walked in, not just with guilt, but fear. Fear that she'd been caught. Not fear of what she had done. So no. I didn't feel bad. Not one bit. Daniel shifted uneasily. And what about me? I turned to him slowly. You? I let out a sharp, bitter laugh. You don't live here anymore, Daniel. His face paled. Come on, let's go inside, get your things, and get out. My voice was ice. Or do you want Eric to help you pack? Eric cracked his knuckles. Daniel swallowed hard. Lauren sobbed. Please, just. I cut her off. 9 minutes. She stared at me for a long moment, like she was trying to find the sister she used to know, the one who would forgive, who would hug her and tell her everything was going to be okay. That sister was dead. She finally turned and rushed inside, Daniel following close behind. Eric and I stood in silence, listening to the hurried footsteps, the frantic rustling of bags. He let out a slow breath. You okay? I didn't answer. Because honestly, I wasn't. I was numb. But the thing about numbness? It doesn't last forever. And when it fades, the real pain begins. But so does the revenge. The clock ticked mercilessly, each second dragging Lauren and Daniel closer to the moment they'd have to walk out of my life for good. I leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed, listening as they scurried around upstairs like the rats they were. The sound of drawers slamming, zippers tugging, whispered curses, it was almost amusing. Almost. Eric stood beside me, his jaw tight. I should have broken his nose. You should have, I agreed flatly. I didn't need rage anymore, not the wild, uncontrollable kind. What I needed was something sharper. More calculated. Daniel and Lauren thought this was the end of their nightmare. They had no idea it was just beginning. After exactly 9 minutes, I walked to the bottom of the stairs. Time's up. A moment later, Lauren appeared at the top, her face blotchy from crying, a hastily packed duffel slung over her shoulder. Daniel was behind her, a suitcase in one hand, his other holding a tissue to his swollen lip. Pathetic. They made their way down hesitantly, as if expecting me to change my mind. I didn't. Eric opened the front door and stepped aside, a silent warning in his stance. Daniel cleared his throat. Look, can we at least? No. Lauren flinched at the cold finality in my voice. I stepped forward, lowering my voice just for her. Did you think you could do this and still have me in your life? That I would still call you my sister? Tears spilled down her cheeks. I was stupid. I don't know why I did it. Yes, you do, I said. You did it because you wanted to. Because it made you feel powerful, sneaking around. And Daniel? I turned to my husband. You did it because you're weak. Because you wanted an easy distraction instead of facing your problems like a man. His gaze darted away, ashamed. I stepped back, exhaling slowly. Get out. Daniel hesitated, then finally moved toward the door. Lauren, however, grabbed my arm, desperation in her grip. Please, I don't want to lose you. I stared at her hand. You lost me the second you betrayed me. She sobbed. I didn't mean to fall in love with him. A strange, sharp laugh escaped me. Love? I shook my head. You don't love him. You love what you got away with. You love the thrill of sneaking around. But now? I leaned in slightly, my voice like steel. Now, you have nothing. She covered her mouth, gasping against another sob. I turned away. Eric, take out the trash. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed Daniel by the collar of his jacket and shoved him outside. Lauren followed, a broken mess of tears and regret. And then, just like that, they were gone. For now. Revenge is best served cold. For the next week, I played my part well, the devastated wife, the betrayed sister, the woman struggling to pick up the pieces. I knew people were watching. Neighbors whispered. Mutual friends sent concerned texts. Even my mother called, her voice thick with worry. Sweetheart, I heard what happened. How are you holding up? I sniffled for dramatic effect. It's hard, Mom. I just feel so lost. It wasn't a complete lie. I was hurt. Furious. But I refused to be a victim. And while the world thought I was licking my wounds, I was planning my revenge. Step 1, destroy Daniel. I started with the easiest target, my soon-to-be ex-husband. He had nowhere to go after I kicked him out. His name wasn't on the house, the mortgage, or even the utilities. I had been the one to handle our finances. The best he could do was crash on a friend's couch. Too bad I made sure that option didn't last long. I sent messages to all of his closest friends. Carefully crafted words dripping with vulnerability and heartbreak. Hey. I know Daniel's been staying with you. I don't want to make things difficult, but I just found out he drained our savings account before he left. I don't even have money for groceries right now. I didn't need to say more. One by one, they turned their backs on him. And just like that, Daniel went from sleeping on couches to sleeping in his car. Step 2, ruin Lauren. Lauren, being the manipulative little snake she was, tried to win back favor. She called family, spun sob stories about how she made a mistake and hated herself for it. I let her talk. Then I made my own calls. To our parents. To mutual friends. To anyone who mattered. I painted a picture of her that was too disgusting to ignore, the woman who betrayed her own sister, the selfish liar who smiled in my face while sneaking around with my husband. It didn't take long before the family started cutting her off. Lauren had always been my mother's favorite. Not anymore. Step 3, let them destroy each other. With no job, no money, and no home, Daniel had no choice but to lean on Lauren. And without her support system, she had no one but him. They turned on each other quickly. I didn't need to lift a finger, just sit back and watch as their pathetic excuse for a relationship unraveled. They fought over money. Over blame. Over the wreckage of their lives. And when Lauren finally realized she had given up her entire family for a man who wasn't even worth it, she begged to come back. Please, she whispered through the phone one night, her voice shaking. Please, just talk to me. I smiled. No. And then I hung up. Checkmate. Daniel tried to reach out a few weeks later, but I had already filed for divorce. My lawyer made sure he left with nothing. Lauren moved out of town shortly after, drowning in the consequences of her own actions. Eric? He was doing better. He threw himself into work, into rebuilding. We met for drinks sometimes, bonded by betrayal and shared bitterness. And me? I flourished. Because I didn't just survive. I won. Lauren and Daniel had lost everything. That should have been enough for me. I should have felt satisfied watching them struggle, knowing they had no one to blame but themselves. But satisfaction wasn't the same as closure. And I wasn't done. Not yet. The divorce that destroyed him. Daniel didn't fight me on the divorce. He couldn't. He was too busy scrambling to survive, too humiliated to even try. He tried reaching out. Once. A pathetic, half-hearted text. Can we at least talk? I didn't respond. My lawyer did. And when the court date arrived, Daniel sat across from me, hollow-eyed and beaten down. He barely had the energy to argue. It didn't matter. I had all the power. The house? Mine. The savings? What was left of it, mine. Our car? Mine. The only thing he got was a pile of debt, a bruised ego, and an eviction notice from whatever shabby apartment he'd scrounged up. When it was all finalized, he didn't even look at me. Coward. I walked out of that courtroom with my head high, my heels clicking against the marble floor like a victory march. Daniel was officially nothing to me. And soon, he'd be nothing to anyone. Lauren's last chance. Lauren was still holding on to some kind of hope. That's what baffled me the most. Despite everything, despite her entire life crumbling, she still believed she could fix things between us. Pathetic. I let her try. She sent messages. She called. She left teary voicemails about how she was so sorry, and how she didn't know who she was anymore. I never responded. I didn't need to. Because my silence was its own punishment. Then, one night, she showed up at my door. It was raining. She stood there, shivering, soaked to the bone, her eyes swollen from crying. Please, she whispered. I just need to talk to you. I stared at her for a long moment. Then I stepped aside. Come in. The final goodbye. Lauren stood in the middle of my living room, dripping onto my floor. She looked fragile. Smaller than I remembered. Like she was barely holding herself together. I poured myself a glass of wine. She didn't ask for one. I don't know what to say, she admitted. I sipped my drink. That's a first. She flinched. I tilted my head, watching her, waiting. Why are you really here, Lauren? She swallowed hard. I don't know how to fix this. I let out a soft, humorless laugh. Fix this? I repeated. You think this is something that can be fixed? Tears welled in her eyes. I don't want to lose you. You already did. Her face crumpled. I took another slow sip, savoring the way her hands trembled, the way her whole body sagged under the weight of her choices. I messed up, she whispered. I lost everything. You. Eric. My home. My family. No one will talk to me anymore. Good. She gasped, like the word had physically struck her. I set my glass down. Do you remember what you said to me, that night at the cabin? She blinked rapidly, confused. What? You told me you didn't mean to fall in love with him. She nodded quickly. I didn't. I smiled. But see, that's the part one don't believe. Lauren froze. I took a slow step closer. You knew exactly what you were doing. Every single time you snuck around with him. Every single time you looked me in the eye and lied. You chose to betray me, over and over again. And now? I gestured to her, the mess of a person standing before me. Now you want forgiveness? She nodded desperately. I let the silence stretch. Let her hope dangle in the air like a dying ember. Then I leaned in, my voice soft, final. No. She let out a broken sob. I stepped back, my expression unreadable. I don't hate you, Lauren. I just don't care about you anymore. She gasped again, her lips trembling. That's worse, isn't it? I mused, tilting my head. You'd rather I scream at you. Hurt you. Anything but this. She didn't answer. Because we both knew it was true. Lauren had always needed attention. Needed validation. Even if it was in the form of anger. But I wasn't giving her that. I was giving her nothing. And that? That was the real punishment. Checkmate. Lauren left that night, broken beyond repair. I watched her go, standing at my window as she walked down the street, her shoulders hunched, her body trembling. She never reached out again. Good. I poured myself another glass of wine, feeling lighter than I had in months. The revenge wasn't just about ruining them. It was about reclaiming me. And I had one. I had everything I needed. And they? They had nothing. Revenge had never tasted so sweet. Lauren was gone. Daniel was ruined. And me? I was finally free. But freedom comes with an eerie silence, the kind that settles in when there's no more war to fight, no more enemies to destroy. For weeks, I walked through the wreckage of my old life, unsure of what to do now that the battle was over. And then, something unexpected happened. Eric called. Rebuilding from ruins. It was a simple message at first, dinner sometime? I hesitated before responding. Eric had been a constant in this mess, the only other person who truly understood the depths of this betrayal. We had fought the same war, suffered the same wounds. But dinner? That felt different. I stared at the message for a long moment before finally replying. Okay. A new beginning? We met at a quiet restaurant, one of those dimly lit places with soft music and candles on every table. It felt too intimate, too much like a date. But I didn't leave. Eric was already there when I arrived, sitting at the bar, 2 drinks in front of him. One was for me. I slid onto the stool beside him, eyeing the glass. You remember my drink? He smirked. Of course. For the first time in a long time, I smiled. And for the first time in a long time, it wasn't forced. Conversations and confessions. We talked about everything except them. Work. Travel. Movies. Stupid childhood stories. It was easy, effortless, like we had both been waiting for this moment. But eventually, the conversation turned. Eric swirled his drink, staring at the amber liquid. Do you think they're still together? I shrugged. I don't know. I don't care. He chuckled. Liar. I smirked. Fine. I care a little. He leaned in slightly. I heard he's been struggling. Can't hold a job. Can't afford a place. I took a sip of my drink, savoring the warmth. Good. Eric studied me for a moment, then exhaled. And Lauren? My stomach twisted at the name, but I refused to let it show. She's probably crying herself to sleep somewhere. Not my problem. His lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. You really don't miss her? I hesitated. I miss the idea of her. He nodded, as if he understood completely. Yeah. Me too. Silence stretched between us. Then, quietly, he said, you know, we could have ended up just like them. I frowned. What do you mean? I mean, if the roles were reversed. If you had been the one who cheated. If I had been the one who betrayed someone I loved. He took a slow sip of his drink. Would we be any better than them? I thought about that for a long moment. No, I admitted. We wouldn't. He looked at me then, really looked at me. So what now? I didn't have an answer. But for the first time in months, I wanted to find out. A different kind of fire. One drink turned into two. Two turned into dinner. Dinner turned into a slow walk under the city lights, laughter lingering between us like something delicate, something precious. And when Eric reached for my hand, I didn't pull away. I let him hold it. Because maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end of our story. Maybe it was the beginning of something new. Something better. And for the first time since that awful morning in the forest, I felt alive. Eric's hand was warm in mine. Solid. Steady. I hadn't realized how much I missed that feeling, being touched by someone who wasn't lying to me, someone who wasn't sneaking around behind my back. I should have felt guilty. But I didn't. Lauren had destroyed our bond as sisters. Daniel had shattered my trust as a wife. And Eric? He was the only one who had been through the same fire. We walked in silence for a while, our fingers loosely intertwined, as if testing the weight of this new connection. Then, softly, he asked, do you ever wonder if they regret it? I let out a quiet laugh. Every single day. And I meant it. Lauren and Daniel had burned their lives to the ground for something that didn't even last. Their passion had been nothing more than a spark in the dark, brief, reckless, and ultimately, pointless. Last I heard, Daniel was couch hopping, barely scraping by. Lauren? She was just gone. A ghost of a sister I once knew. I didn't reach out. Neither did she. And that was fine with me. Eric exhaled. I don't think I'll ever understand it. You're not supposed to, I said simply. People like us don't do things like that. He looked at me then, something unreadable in his expression. People like us? I stopped walking, turning to face him fully. Loyal people. People who actually give a damn about the ones they love. Something flickered in his eyes, something deep, something raw. And then, before I could think too hard about it, he reached up, tucking a stray strand of hair behind my ear. I froze. Not out of fear, but out of something else. Something unfamiliar and terrifying. I wasn't ready for this. Was I? Eric. His fingers lingered against my cheek. Yeah. I swallowed hard. I don't know if I can do this. He didn't pull away. Instead, he nodded, as if he understood exactly what I meant. You don't have to, he murmured. Not yet. Relief flooded through me, and I let out a shaky breath. Thank you. But even as I said it, I knew the truth. The fire was already there. And sooner or later, it was going to consume us both. Lauren's return. I thought I was done with her. I was wrong. It happened 2 weeks later. I was in my kitchen, sipping coffee, enjoying the rare peace of a quiet morning. The divorce papers had been finalized, my house was officially mine, and for the first time in months, I felt light. Then my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, expecting it to be Eric. But it wasn't. It was Lauren. My breath caught. I hadn't seen her name flash across my screen in weeks. Not since she showed up at my door, begging for forgiveness. I hesitated. Then, against my better judgment, I answered. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I need to see you. I should have hung up. I should have told her to rot in whatever hell she'd created for herself. But something in her tone stopped me. It wasn't desperation this time. It was fear. The meeting. We met at a coffee shop, neutral ground. Lauren looked different. Her once perfectly styled hair was dull, her eyes hollow. She had lost weight, her clothes hanging looser on her frame. She looked like someone who had been chewed up and spit out by life. I didn't feel bad for her. I just felt nothing. She sat across from me, fidgeting with her hands. Thanks for coming. I said nothing. She swallowed hard. I don't know how to say this, so I'll just come out with it. I raised an eyebrow. Go on. She exhaled shakily. Daniel hit me. Silence. For a long moment, I just stared at her, waiting for her to continue. She did. It wasn't the first time. Her voice trembled. At first, it was just yelling. Shoving. Then it got worse. She let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. I guess I thought I deserved it. After everything I did to you. My stomach twisted. Because even after all the pain she had caused me, even after she had betrayed me, I never wanted this for her. Why are you telling me this? I asked, my voice careful. She blinked rapidly, as if trying to hold back tears. Because I have no one else. I exhaled slowly, setting my coffee cup down. And what do you expect me to do? She let out a weak chuckle. Honestly? I don't know. I studied her carefully. Lauren had always been good at manipulation. She knew how to twist a situation to make herself look like the victim. But this? This wasn't an act. This was real. And that scared me more than anything. She sniffled. I left him. I have nothing. No money, no place to stay. I just needed to talk to someone who actually knew me before all of this. I hesitated. Every part of me screamed to walk away. To let her deal with the consequences of her choices. But another part, the part that still remembered sleepovers and shared secrets and childhood giggles, was struggling to ignore her pain. So I made a decision. I leaned forward, locking eyes with her. You are not staying with me. She flinched but nodded. I know. But I will help you, once. Hope flickered in her gaze. How? I grabbed a napkin, scribbled down a number, and slid it across the table. This is a shelter for women in your situation. They can help you find a job, a place to stay. She picked up the napkin with shaking hands. Thank you. I held up a finger. One time, Lauren. That's it. After this, you're on your own. She swallowed hard. I understand. I stood up, throwing a few bills on the table for my coffee. Then, just before I walked away, I looked at her one last time. You threw your life away for him, I said quietly. And now he's destroyed you too. Her lips trembled. I turned and walked out the door, leaving her in the past where she belonged. And as I stepped into the sunlight, inhaling the crisp morning air, I realized I finally felt free. I should have felt lighter after walking away from Lauren. But I didn't. That conversation lingered in my mind for days, like a ghost I couldn't shake. I didn't regret refusing to let her back into my life. She had made her choices, and she had to live with them. But something about seeing her so broken gnawed at me. I wasn't a cruel person. I wasn't like them. But I also wasn't her savior. I had given her one lifeline, and whether she used it or not was up to her. I had my own life to live now. And I refused to let her drag me down with her again. The past comes crawling back. Lauren must have taken my warning seriously because she didn't contact me again. But Daniel? Daniel was a different story. It started with an email. A single, pathetic sentence. "Please, just hear me out." I deleted it without reading further. Then came the texts. "Daniel, I know you hate me, but can we talk? Daniel, I'm sorry. I was an idiot. Daniel, please, just give me 5 minutes." I blocked his number. Then he showed up at my job. I was walking out of the office when I saw him leaning against his rusted car, looking as pitiful as ever. He had lost weight. His once confident posture was slouched, his face tired and unshaven. For a second, I hesitated. Not out of sympathy, but out of sheer disbelief. He had the nerve to stand here and wait for me? I considered walking right past him, pretending he didn't exist. But something inside me stirred, a deep, burning need to make sure he knew exactly what he had lost. So I walked up to him, my heels clicking against the pavement like gunshots. He straightened slightly. "Hey." I crossed my arms. "What do you want, Daniel?" He let out a long sigh. I needed to see you." I tilted my head. "Why?" "Because," he ran a hand through his messy hair. "Because I screwed up. And I lost everything. And I know I don't deserve anything from you, but..." I cut him off with a sharp laugh. "Oh, you know that, do you?" His jaw clenched. I was a fool. "Yes," I agreed. "You were." He exhaled. "I miss you." Something inside me snapped. I took a step closer, my voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "No, Daniel. You don't miss me," I said coldly. "You miss the life you had with me. The security. The comfort. The home I built for you. You don't miss me. You miss what I gave you." His face twisted in something close to pain. But I wasn't done. "You threw me away from my sister," I continued. "You lied to me. You humiliated me. And now that she's gone, you think you can just crawl back." His hands curled into fists. "I never stopped loving you." I smiled, a slow, cruel thing. "Oh, I know," I murmured. "That's the best part." His breath hitched. "What?" I leaned in just enough so he could hear me clearly. "I know you still love me. And I know it kills you that I don't love you back." His entire body tensed. I straightened, smoothing my dress. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have better things to do." Then I turned and walked away. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't look back. The night that changed everything. Eric and I had been dancing around each other for weeks. The night walks. The casual dinners. The lingering glances. But we hadn't crossed that line. Not yet. That changed one evening when he invited me over for dinner. It was nothing fancy, just takeout and wine on his couch. We talked, we laughed, we felt normal. Then, at some point, the silence between us shifted. Eric reached for my hand, tracing soft circles against my palm. I should have pulled away. But I didn't. Instead, I looked up at him, my heart pounding. "You're not just doing this because we were both hurt, right?" I whispered. His jaw tightened. No. I swallowed. Then why? He exhaled slowly, his fingers tightening around mine. Because I don't just see you as the woman Daniel betrayed. He met my gaze. I see you. And I like what I see. Something warm bloomed in my chest. Then he kissed me. And for the first time in months, I let myself feel. Letting go. Falling for Eric wasn't easy. I fought it. Resisted it. Because part of me was terrified. Terrified that history would repeat itself. That I'd trust again, only to be shattered. But Eric wasn't Daniel. He wasn't a coward. He wasn't a liar. He was good. And slowly, painfully, I let myself believe in us. Months passed. Seasons changed. And one day, I woke up and realized. I didn't think about Lauren anymore. I didn't think about Daniel. I didn't think about revenge. I was just happy. Truly, finally happy. And that? That was the best revenge of all. Happiness was a strange thing. After months of burning rage, of plotting, of drowning in betrayal, I wasn't sure I knew how to exist without it. But here I was. With Eric. With a life that no longer revolved around pain. And I wasn't just surviving. I was living. The ghosts that wouldn't die. It had been almost a year since the night at the cabin. Since I walked in on the two people I trusted most tearing my world apart. Since I destroyed them both. Lauren had vanished from my life completely. Whether she had moved away or just faded into obscurity, I didn't care enough to find out. Daniel, though? He was still lurking. Not in a threatening way, no, he didn't have the spine for that. But every now and then, I'd hear about him. A mutual friend would mention seeing him at a bar, drunk and pathetic. Someone else would say he was bouncing between dead-end jobs, never staying in one place for long. He was a ghost of the man he used to be. And part of me should have felt satisfaction in that. But all I felt was, nothing. Daniel had already lost the most important thing he'd ever had. Me. Closure, at last. It happened unexpectedly. I was at the grocery store, picking out wine, when I felt someone watching me. I turned. And there he was. Daniel. He looked like hell. His clothes were wrinkled, his face unshaven, his eyes hollow. He wasn't the confident, smooth-talking man I had once loved. He was just a man who had lost everything. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. Then, slowly, he walked toward me. I sighed. What do you want, Daniel? He hesitated. I don't know. I arched an eyebrow. That's a first. He let out a weak chuckle, rubbing a hand over his face. I guess I needed to see you. I tilted my head. And? His throat bobbed. You look good. I smiled. I am good. His gaze dropped. I'm not. I crossed my arms. Not my problem. Silence. Then, so softly I almost didn't hear it, he whispered, I miss you. A year ago, those words would have shattered me. Now? They meant nothing. I exhaled, shaking my head. You don't miss me, Daniel. You miss what you had with me. You miss having a home. Stability. Someone who actually gave a damn about you. His face crumpled. I stepped closer, my voice unwavering. But you threw that away. You chose to ruin it. And now? You have to live with that. A broken laugh escaped him. Yeah, he muttered. I do. For a moment, I considered saying something cruel. Something that would twist the knife even deeper. But then I realized. I didn't need to. Daniel was already living his punishment. And I was free. So instead of anger, instead of vengeance, I just smiled. Goodbye, Daniel. Then I walked away. And this time, I knew I'd never see him again. The future is mine. That night, I sat on the porch with Eric, a glass of wine in my hand, the stars stretched out above us. I told him about Daniel. He listened, quiet and steady, before finally asking, "How do you feel?" I thought about it. Then, finally, I said, "Nothing." And that was the truth. Daniel was just a chapter in my story. Lauren was just a lesson learned. And the future? It was mine. Eric reached over, lacing his fingers through mine. And as I leaned into him, feeling warmth, feeling love, I realized something. I had won. Not through revenge. Not through destruction. But through moving on. And that was the sweetest revenge of all. Time has a funny way of healing things. Not erasing them. Not making them disappear. But dulling the sharp edges. Softening the memories so they no longer have the power to cut. It had been nearly 2 years since that night in the cabin. 2 years since my world burned down. And now, I was standing in the middle of a life I had rebuilt from the ashes. And it was beautiful. The last remnants of the past. I hadn't heard from Lauren since the day I gave her the number to the shelter. I didn't know if she had used it. I didn't care. But one day, out of nowhere, a letter arrived. No return address. No name. Just a simple envelope with my name on it. I stared at it for a long time before finally opening it. The handwriting was familiar. Shaky. Desperate. Lauren. I know I don't deserve this, but I need you to know, I'm sorry. Truly, deeply sorry. I never expected you to forgive me, and I accept that you never will. But I wanted you to know that I'm trying. Trying to be better. Trying to find a way to live with what I did to you. I don't expect anything from you. I just wanted to say, I love you. Even if you don't love me anymore. There was no request. No plea for reconciliation. Just those last few words. I read it once. Then I folded it neatly and placed it in a drawer. Not to hold on to it. Not to revisit it. Just to close it. That was the last time I ever heard from Lauren. And that was enough for me. The final piece of closure. One evening, Eric and I were curled up on the couch when my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I frowned but answered anyway. Hello? A hesitant pause. Then, a voice I hadn't heard in almost a year. Hey. Daniel. I exhaled through my nose, already regretting picking up. What do you want? He let out a breath. Nothing. I wanted to say that I'm sorry. I almost laughed. Almost. You're a little late, I said, my voice calm. I know. Silence. Then, he asked, Are you happy? I glanced at Eric, who was watching me with quiet patience, his fingers tracing patterns on my arm. I smiled. Yes, I said simply. Daniel let out a soft chuckle, one that was more defeat than amusement. Good, he murmured. You deserve that. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. I know. Another pause. Then, softly, goodbye, then. I didn't hesitate. Goodbye, Daniel. And with that, I hung up. For the last time. A life I chose. Moving on isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing happiness over bitterness. It's about choosing to stop looking back. And that's exactly what I did. I married Eric a year later, in a quiet ceremony by the river. Not out of loneliness. Not out of shared wounds. But because, through all of it, he had seen me at my lowest and still stood beside me. Because he didn't complete me, he just made my life even better. And as I stood there, my fingers wrapped around his, the water rushing beside us, the past nothing more than a distant memory, I realized something. Revenge had never been about destruction. It had been about becoming whole again. And I had done just that. I had survived. I had won. And I was finally, free.